Part 2, Block 1. The highway stretched before us like a black ribbon, carrying us farther away from the only home Emma had ever known. Rain tapped a gentle rhythm against the windows of Vincent's SUV, the wipers creating a hypnotic tempo that matched the beating of my anxious heart. Emma slept soundly in my arms, her small body warm against my chest, blissfully unaware of how drastically our lives had changed in the span of a single night. Vincent sat beside me, one hand on the steering wheel, the other resting on my knee, a silent reassurance that we weren't alone in this journey into uncertainty. We'd driven for nearly 3 hours, Enzo following closely in another vehicle, our small convoy moving steadily north along the coast and then inland, toward mountains whose shadows loomed in the pre-dawn darkness. "Almost there," Vincent said, his voice low to avoid waking Emma. His profile was etched against the faint glow of the dashboard lights. Strong jaw tight with concentration, eyes constantly scanning the road ahead and the rearview mirror behind. I nodded, too exhausted and overwhelmed to form words. The adrenaline that had carried me through packing our essentials and fleeing my apartment had faded, leaving behind a bone-deep fatigue and a mind spinning with unanswered questions. Where exactly were we going? How long would we stay? What would happen when David realized we'd disappeared? And beneath these practical concerns, a deeper question persisted. Had I made the right choice in tying Emma's fate to this man, this powerful, dangerous, enigmatic man who claimed to be leaving his criminal empire behind for us? As if sensing my thoughts, Vincent's hand squeezed my knee gently. "I know this isn't easy," he said, eyes still on the road. "Leaving everything behind, trusting me. I promise you, Lily, I'll make it worth the sacrifice." I looked down at the sapphire ring on my finger, remembering his words from earlier that night. 2 months, and then a lifetime if you'll have me. The timeline had accelerated dramatically, but his promise remained the same, a future free from fear, from struggle, from the shadows of both our pasts. "I do trust you," I said softly, surprising myself with the truth of it. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. The road narrowed as we turned onto a private drive, gravel crunching beneath the tires. Tall pines lined the path, their branches creating a natural canopy that shielded us from view. After several minutes of winding through dense forest, the trees parted to reveal a cabin. Though cabin seemed too humble a word for the structure before us. Built of massive timber and stone, it sprawled along the edge of a small lake, its windows dark and silent. No exterior, lights illuminated the property, nothing to signal human presence to any watching eyes. The perfect hideaway. "My grandfather built this place," Vincent said as he parked near a side entrance, "before the family business became what it eventually did. No one knows about it except Maria, and now Enzo. It's not in my name, not connected to any of my known properties." He got out first, scanning the area with practiced vigilance before opening my door. I stepped carefully into the cool night air, adjusting Emma in my arms. She stirred slightly, mumbling something about dragons before settling back into sleep against my shoulder. Enzo appeared silently beside us, his tall figure materializing from the shadows like a ghost. "Perimeter is clear," he reported quietly. "I'll set up surveillance and do regular sweeps." Vincent nodded his approval, then led us toward the cabin. The door opened to his touch, revealing an interior that defied my expectations. Rather than rustic or outdated, the space was elegant and modern, open concept with soaring ceilings, contemporary furniture in muted tones, and a wall of windows that would showcase the lake view come daylight. "There are 3 bedrooms upstairs," Vincent said, taking my small suitcase from Enzo. "The master suite has an attached room perfect for Emma. Why don't you put her down and try to rest? We can discuss everything in the morning." The suggestion of sleep was irresistible. I followed Vincent up a floating staircase to a spacious bedroom with a king-sized bed and, as promised, a smaller room connected through a barn-style sliding door. The smaller room had clearly been prepared in advance. A twin bed with soft flannel sheets was turned down, and a stuffed bear sat propped against the pillow, waiting to welcome its new owner. "You knew we'd come here," I said, the realization dawning as I gently laid Emma on the bed. She immediately curled around the bear, accepting this new friend without waking. Vincent stood in the doorway, watching us with an expression that made my heart constrict, tender and fiercely protective all at once. "I hoped you would, eventually," he admitted. "Not tonight, not like this. But I've been preparing safe houses since the day I decided to leave my old life behind." I covered Emma with a soft blanket and brushed a curl from her forehead before joining Vincent in the main bedroom. Exhaustion pulled at my limbs, but questions kept my mind racing. "David knew about us," I said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "How? We were so careful." Vincent's expression darkened as he removed his suit jacket and loosened his tie. Someone in my organization must have been watching, reporting back to him, or to others who used him to send a message. "A message? That I'm vulnerable now, that they know what matters to me." He sat beside me, taking my hands in his. The sapphire ring caught the subtle light from the bedside lamp. "Lily, I need you to understand something. What I'm doing, walking away, it's unprecedented. In my world, there are only two ways to leave: in handcuffs or in a coffin." A chill ran through me at his blunt words. "But you said you had a plan, that you've been preparing." "I have," he assured me quickly. "And it's nearly complete. But tonight was a warning. David may be a coward, but he would never have approached you in your home without encouragement, without someone promising him protection or compensation. So what happens now?" I asked, fear and fatigue making my voice smaller than I intended. Vincent brushed his thumb across my cheekbone, his touch impossibly gentle for a man who commanded so much power. "Now, we accelerate the timeline. I have meetings scheduled for tomorrow, calls I can make securely from here to finalize the transfer of my legitimate businesses to offshore accounts. Within a week, I'll have everything in place for us to leave the country." "A week," I echoed, trying to process the rapid change in plans. Just hours ago, we'd been talking about 2 or 3 months of transition. Now we were discussing international flight in days. "Is that too fast?" Concern etched lines around Vincent's eyes. "I know this is asking so much of you." Of Emma. I thought of my daughter sleeping peacefully in the next room, of the life I'd struggled to build for us in our tiny apartment, of the uncertain future that awaited us. But I also thought of David's face contorted with rage, of the years of fear and poverty behind us, and of the promise of security and love that Vincent offered. "No," I decided, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. "It's not too fast. Emma adapts quickly, and I've been running on borrowed time since the divorce anyway. A fresh start somewhere new might be exactly what we need." Relief washed over Vincent's features. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against mine. "Thank you," he whispered, the words carrying the weight of all he couldn't express. Gratitude, hope, perhaps even love, though neither of us had spoken that word yet. We sat in silence for a moment, the connection between us strengthening in the quiet, until Vincent reluctantly pulled away. "You should rest," he said, rising from the bed. "Take the master suite. I'll use one of the other bedrooms." His consideration touched me, after everything that had happened, after the intimacy we'd shared earlier at the beach house. He was still giving me space, still respecting boundaries I hadn't explicitly set. "Vincent," I called as he reached the door. He turned, silhouetted against the hallway light. "Stay, please." I didn't have to explain what I meant. He closed the door softly and returned to me, helping me out of my jacket with reverent hands. We undressed in silence, down to our undergarments, both too exhausted for anything more than the comfort of closeness. When he slid beneath the covers beside me, his body warm and solid against mine, I felt some of the day's tension finally begin to dissolve. "Sleep," he murmured, drawing me against his chest. "I'll watch over you both." For the first time since grabbing Vincent's hand in that restaurant 3 months ago, I surrendered completely to trust, allowing myself to be vulnerable without fear. His heartbeat steady beneath my ear, I drifted into dreamless sleep. Morning came with pale sunlight streaming through windows I hadn't noticed, had no curtains. Unnecessary, I realized, given the isolation of the property and the privacy afforded by the surrounding forest. I woke alone in the massive bed, momentarily disoriented until memories of the previous night came rushing back. Panic flared briefly, until I heard Emma's giggle floating from somewhere downstairs, followed by the low rumble of Vincent's voice. I slipped on the robe someone, Vincent or perhaps Enzo, had laid at the foot of the bed, and padded barefoot toward the sound of my daughter's laughter. I found them in the kitchen, a scene so domestic it made my chest ache. Emma sat on a bar stool at the island counter, her wild curls even more untamed after sleep, watching in delight as Vincent flipped pancakes with practiced ease. He'd shed his formal attire for dark jeans and a simple gray Henley that clung to the muscles of his shoulders and back. "Mommy!" Emma exclaimed, spotting me in the doorway. "Vincent's making pancakes shaped like animals. Look, this one's an elephant." "An elephant," Vincent corrected gently, sliding the misshapen pancake onto her plate. His eyes met mine over Emma's head, a smile warming his features. "Good morning. Coffee's ready." It was such a simple thing. Coffee, pancakes, morning greetings. But the normalcy of it struck me deeply after the chaos of our midnight flight. As Vincent poured me coffee, adding the perfect amount of cream without asking, I marveled at how quickly the extraordinary could begin to feel ordinary. "Any word from Enzo?" I asked quietly, while Emma concentrated on drowning her elephant pancake in maple syrup. Vincent nodded slightly. "All clear. He checked your apartment early this morning. No sign of David or anyone watching the place. It seems they haven't realized we're gone yet." Relief washed through me, though I knew it was temporary. Eventually, someone would notice our absence. Marco at the restaurant when I didn't show for my shift. Mrs. Patel when we didn't return to the apartment. Perhaps even David himself if he tried to confront me again. "I've made some calls already," Vincent continued, his voice low enough that Emma couldn't hear over her enthusiastic chewing. "The arrangements are moving forward. I've also asked Maria to join us here tomorrow. I thought Emma might appreciate a familiar face, and it will allow me to focus on finalizing everything." I nodded, grateful for his thoughtfulness. Emma had bonded quickly with Maria during our dinner at Vincent's home, and having another caregiver would help maintain some sense of normalcy for her while Vincent and I dealt with the practical aspects of our imminent departure. "What about my job?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "And Emma's preschool?" Vincent's expression softened. "I've taken care of it. An email has been sent to your manager explaining a family emergency requiring immediate leave. As for Emma's school, we can notify them today if you'd like, or simply let the absence speak for itself." It struck me then how final this all was. We weren't just hiding temporarily. We were severing all ties to our former lives. No 2 weeks' notice, no proper goodbyes. Just a clean break and a new beginning. "It feels strange," I admitted, watching Emma happily demolish her breakfast, oblivious to the significance of this morning. Walking away from everything. Even though there wasn't much to walk away from. Vincent set down his coffee and took my hand, his thumb brushing over the sapphire ring. "What we're building will be worth it, Lily. I promise you that." The conviction in his voice steadied me, reminding me why I'd chosen this path. Before I could respond, Emma piped up, her face sticky with syrup. "Can we explore outside? I want to see the lake." Vincent's serious expression melted into a smile. "Of course, Piccola. But first, let's clean that face, As Vincent helped Emma wash up, I wandered to the wall of windows overlooking the lake. The view was breathtaking. Crystal clear water reflecting the surrounding pines and the blue sky above. A small dock extending into the gentle waves. In another life, this would be a vacation paradise. Now, it was our sanctuary, our temporary haven, before we left everything behind. I pressed my palm against the cool glass, the sapphire catching the morning light. 1 week to prepare for a completely new life. 1 week to say goodbye to the person I had been and embrace whoever I would become. Not just Lily Cooper, struggling single mother, but someone new. Someone who stood beside Vincent Russo as he too transformed into something different than what he had been. "Penny for your thoughts?" Vincent asked, coming to stand beside me. Emma had disappeared, presumably to get dressed for our lakeside exploration. "I was just thinking about new beginnings," I said, turning to face him, "and how sometimes the thing that seems the most frightening can also be the most freeing." He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his eyes searching mine. "Are you frightened, Lily?" I considered the question honestly. "Yes," I admitted. "But not of you. Of the unknown." Of what happens if this doesn't work, if we can't outrun your past or mine. We won't need to outrun anything, Vincent said with quiet confidence. We're not just running away, we're moving towards something neither of us has had before, a life of our own choosing, not dictated by circumstances or obligations. His words resonated deep within me, touching on a longing I'd barely acknowledged even to myself, the desire for agency, for the freedom to shape my own future rather than merely surviving each day. I want that, I whispered. For Emma. For myself. For us. Vincent's eyes darkened with an emotion I was beginning to recognize, one that mirrored what I felt growing in my own heart. He leaned down, his lips meeting mine in a kiss that spoke of promise and possibility, gentler than our embrace at the beach house, but no less meaningful. Then let's make it happen, he said when we parted, his forehead resting against mine. Together. Emma's footsteps thundered down the stairs, breaking the moment. Ready? She announced, appearing in a mismatched outfit of purple leggings and a yellow t-shirt, her beloved stuffed rabbit clutched in one arm. Vincent laughed, the sound warming me from within. So I see, he said, offering her his hand. Shall we explore our kingdom, princess? Emma took his hand without hesitation, then reached for mine with her free one, creating a chain of connection between the three of us. As we stepped outside into the crisp morning air, Emma swinging between us with delighted giggles, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The simple joy of belonging, of being part of something whole, whatever dangers lay ahead, whatever challenges we might face in building our new life. In this moment, I knew with absolute certainty that I had made the right choice in grabbing Vincent Russo's hand. Not just that first night in the restaurant, but every day since. The next 3 days passed in a strange bubble of domesticity, a calm before the storm we all knew was brewing. Emma took to cabin life with the resilient adaptability of childhood, delighting in exploring the lakeside, collecting pine cones, and feeding the family of ducks that visited our dock each morning. To her, this was simply an unexpected vacation, an adventure with her mother and the man who had somehow, without my noticing the exact moment it happened, become a fixture in her small world. Maria arrived as promised, bringing with her suitcases of children's books, art supplies, and educational games that transformed one corner of the great room into Emma's personal domain. My daughter flourished under her gentle attention, soaking up Italian phrases and stories of Vincent's childhood with equal enthusiasm. Vincent himself was a study in contrasts, tender and playful with Emma one moment, then slipping away to conduct tense phone conversations in rapid Italian the next. I caught glimpses of the man he must be in his other life, commanding, resolute, occasionally frightening in his intensity. Yet each time he returned to us, that hardness would melt away, replaced by the man who taught Emma how to skip stones across the lake's surface, and who held me close each night, as if I might disappear by morning. On the 4th day, everything changed. I woke before dawn to find Vincent already dressed, standing by the window with his phone pressed to his ear. The tension in his shoulders told me everything I needed to know, even before he turned to face me. "They've found David," he said without preamble, his voice carefully controlled, "in his apartment. He's dead." The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. David, my ex-husband, my tormentor, the father of my child, dead. I sank onto the edge of the bed, trying to process the implications. How? I managed to ask, though part of me didn't want to know the answer. Vincent crossed the room to kneel before me, taking my trembling hands in his, made to look like suicide. Pills, alcohol, a note. His eyes held mine steadily. "Lily, I need you to hear me carefully. I did not order this." I searched his face, looking for any sign of deception, any hint that he was protecting me from a darker truth. All I found was grim sincerity. "Then who?" I whispered, though I already suspected the answer. "The same people who used him to send me a message," Vincent replied, his jaw tight with barely controlled anger. "They're escalating, making it clear that anyone connected to me is a target." Fear clutched at my throat, not for myself, but for Emma. "Are we in danger here?" "No," Vincent said firmly. No one knows about this place. Enzo has secured the perimeter, and Maria's brother arrives today with additional security. We're safe for now. He squeezed my hands gently, but this changes our timeline again. We need to leave the country within 48 hours. 48 hours, I repeated, my mind racing. What about Emma? What do I tell her about David? Vincent's expression softened. Nothing for now. She's barely mentioned him since we left. When she's older, when she asks questions, we'll find the right words then. He was right, of course. Emma hadn't seen her father in months before our hasty departure, his presence in her life inconsistent at best. The emotional fallout of explaining his death would far outweigh any closure it might provide her 4-year-old mind. The police, I said suddenly, a new worry surfacing. They'll investigate. They'll want to talk to me, as his ex-wife. It's being handled, Vincent assured me, though the phrase sent a chill through me. My contacts in the department will ensure your name is kept out of the investigation. The narrative will focus on David's financial troubles, his drinking. No connection to us. The efficiency with which Vincent could manipulate even this situation should have disturbed me more than it did. Instead, I felt a guilty relief that Emma and I would be spared the trauma of police interviews and newspaper headlines. Where will we go? I asked, changing the subject to something more manageable, something I could actually control. Vincent stood, pulling me gently to my feet. I own a villa in southern Italy. Remote, beautiful, completely secure. We'll start there. Stay until I'm certain no one is looking for us. Then move on to wherever you and Emma would be happiest. The idea of Italy, of sun-drenched landscapes and ancient cities so different from the only home I'd ever known, was both exhilarating and terrifying. What about language, work, Emma's education? A small smile touched Vincent's lips. You're already learning Italian from Maria. Emma absorbs languages like a sponge at her age. As for work, he hesitated, choosing his words carefully. My legitimate businesses need managing. Art galleries, vineyards, boutique hotels. You could be involved as much or as little as you wish. There it was again. The contrast between the world I knew and the one Vincent inhabited. From struggling waitress to potential manager of international businesses, all because I'd grabbed the wrong or perhaps the right hand in a moment of desperation. This is really happening, isn't it? I murmured, more to myself than to him. Vincent cupped my face in his hands. Yes, but only if it's what you want, Lily. Say the word, and I'll find another way. Something that keeps you in the country. Something... I silenced him with a kiss, pouring into it all the certainty I suddenly felt. When we parted, both slightly breathless, I said, No. We do this together, just like we planned. Italy, new identities, new beginning. Emma and I are all in, Vincent. Relief and something deeper washed over his features. He pressed his forehead to mine. Thank you, he whispered, for trusting me with your future. With Emma's future, the intimacy of the moment was broken by a soft knock at the door. Maria's voice called through the wood. Vincent, there's a call you need to take. It's Alessandro. Vincent tensed, pulling away from me with visible reluctance. I'll be right there, he answered, then turned back to me. Alessandro is my lawyer. He's finalizing our travel documents. I nodded, understanding the urgency. Go. I'll get Emma ready for the day. As Vincent left, I moved to the window, gazing out at the peaceful lake that had been our temporary sanctuary. The news of David's death should have affected me more deeply than it did, I thought with a pang of guilt. But the truth was, I had mourned the man I once loved years ago, when his drinking and abuse had transformed him into someone unrecognizable. This final ending felt more like closing a book I'd finished reading long ago than losing someone who still mattered in my life. Emma was already awake when I entered her adjoining room, sitting cross-legged on her bed with the stuffed bear Vincent had provided, engaged in what appeared to be a serious conversation with the toy. Good morning, sunshine, I said, pushing aside my troubled thoughts to smile at my daughter. What are you and Mr. Bear discussing so intently? His name is Bruno, Emma informed me solemnly, and we're planning our adventure on the airplane. He's never been on one either, my heart squeezed at her innocent excitement. Well, Bruno is lucky to have such an experienced guide as you, I told her, sitting beside her on the bed. How did you know we'll be going on an airplane soon? Maria told me, Emma replied, brushing Bruno's fur with her small fingers. She said we're going to Italy where they have the best ice cream in the whole world, and I can learn to speak like her. Italy, I corrected gently. And yes, we are. Very soon. Emma looked up at me, her brown eyes, so like mine, serious suddenly. Are we going to live there forever? What about school, and Mrs. Patel and my friend Zoe? The questions caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on the logistics of our escape, on Vincent's dangerous world and our safety, that I hadn't fully considered how Emma would process leaving behind the few attachments she had. We might live there for a long time, I said carefully. And you'll go to a new school with new friends. We can write letters to Mrs. Patel and Zoe, and maybe someday they can visit us. Emma considered this, her small face scrunched in thought. Will Vincent live with us too? Another question I wasn't entirely prepared for. Vincent and I hadn't explicitly discussed living arrangements, though the assumption seemed to be that we would be together. But how to explain this new relationship to a child who had only known her father's sporadic, often frightening presence? Yes, I said finally. Vincent will be with us. Is that okay with you? Emma nodded, surprising me with her certainty. He makes good pancakes, and he doesn't shout like Daddy did. And he looks at you like the princes look at the princesses in my books. Out of the mouths of babes, I swallowed the sudden lump in my throat. Amazed at my daughter's perception. You're right, I said softly. He does make very good pancakes. This seemed to settle the matter for Emma, who hopped off the bed, Bruno clutched to her chest. Can I wear my purple dress today, the one with the pockets? I want to collect more rocks for our trip. Of course, I said, grateful for the resilience of children, for their ability to accept change as long as they felt secure in the love surrounding them. Downstairs, the atmosphere had shifted noticeably. Enzo stood near the front entrance, speaking in low tones with a man I hadn't seen before. Presumably Maria's brother, judging by their similar features. Vincent was pacing the length of the great room, phone pressed to his ear, his expression thunderous. Maria intercepted me at the bottom of the stairs, gently taking Emma's hand. Good morning, Tesoro, she said warmly to my daughter. Shall we find your purple dress and then make some special Italian breakfast? Emma went with her happily, leaving me to approach Vincent as he ended his call with a terse, Capisco, fallo. What's wrong? I asked quietly, noting the tension radiating from him. Vincent ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. The police found a connection, not to us directly, but to one of my businesses. David apparently had a receipt from Bellissimo in his pocket, dated the night you first met me. My stomach dropped. That can't be coincidence. No, Vincent agreed grimly. It's another message. Another move in this game they're playing. What does it mean for our plans? Vincent's expression softened as he looked at me, visibly making an effort to control his anger for my sake. It means we move tonight instead of tomorrow. Alessandro has expedited everything. New passports, travel documents, transfer of funds. The plane will be ready at a private airfield at midnight. Tonight? The word came out in a whisper. Despite knowing our departure was imminent, the sudden acceleration sent a wave of panic through me. But Emma's things, our clothes, everything you need will be waiting for us in Italy, Vincent assured me, taking my hands in his. And anything of sentimental value can be shipped later, when it's safe. I nodded, trying to calm my racing heart. What about your business? The transition you've been working on? A shadow crossed Vincent's face. Not as complete as I'd hoped, but the essential parts are done. My second-in-command, Franco, will handle the remaining transfers. The legitimate businesses are already separated from the other activities, which is what matters most. The careful way he referred to his criminal enterprises still struck me as strange. A linguistic dance around the reality of the power he wielded, the lines he had crossed. Yet here he was, systematically dismantling that empire, all for the chance at a normal life with Emma and me. Who's trying to stop you? I asked suddenly. Who killed David and left that receipt? Vincent's jaw tightened. I have suspicions. There are 3 families who would see my departure as an opportunity to seize territory, contracts. But the method, using David, the psychological warfare, that points to someone specific. Who? He hesitated, clearly reluctant to draw me deeper into his world. My former mentor, Salvatore Ricci. He practically raised me after my father died, groomed me to take over certain operations. He wouldn't take my retirement as merely a business decision. He'd see it as personal betrayal. The name meant nothing to me, but the way Vincent spoke it, with a mixture of respect and wariness, told me everything I needed to know about the threat this man posed. "Will he follow us to Italy?" I asked, voicing my deepest fear. "No," Vincent said with conviction. "His power is here, his network limited to North America. Once we're across the Atlantic, we'll be beyond his reach." I wanted desperately to believe him, to trust that this nightmare would end once we boarded that plane. But a nagging doubt persisted. If he's as powerful as you say, couldn't he just send someone? Vincent's eyes met mine, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw a flicker of vulnerability. He could try, but I've spent my entire adult life building contingencies, creating fail-safes. The villa in Italy isn't just beautiful, Lily. It's a fortress. And I have allies there who owe me their lives, people who have no connection to Salvatore. He drew me close, his arms encircling me in a protective embrace. "I won't let anything happen to you or Emma," he murmured against my hair. "I would die before I let anyone harm you." I believed him. Despite every rational argument against trusting a man with his history, I believed in the fierce protectiveness I felt in his embrace, in the tenderness I'd witnessed between him and Emma, in the vulnerability he showed only to me. "Then we leave tonight," I said, drawing back to meet his gaze. New names, new life. Relief washed over Vincent's features. He brushed his lips against mine, a feather-light touch that somehow carried more weight than our most passionate kisses. "Thank you," he whispered. The rest of the day passed in a flurry of controlled activity. Maria helped Emma pack her favorite toys and books into a small backpack, turning the process into a game to maintain the illusion of adventure rather than escape. Enzo and his team swept the property repeatedly, checking and rechecking security measures. Vincent disappeared into his makeshift office for hours, emerging only occasionally to reassure me with a touch or brief update. I found myself standing by the lake as sunset painted the water in shades of gold and crimson, trying to absorb the beauty of this place we'd barely had time to know. The sapphire ring on my finger caught the dying light, reminding me of Vincent's promise. Not just of security or protection, but of love. A love I hadn't been looking for, hadn't believed I deserved after the disaster of my marriage to David. "Penny for your thoughts?" Vincent's voice came from behind me, echoing the question he'd asked days earlier. I turned to find him watching me, his tall figure silhouetted against the fading light. He'd changed into dark travel clothes, jeans, a black sweater, sturdy boots, practical attire that somehow only enhanced his natural elegance. "I was just thinking about how strange life is," I replied, offering him a small smile. 3 months ago, I was a waitress living paycheck to paycheck, trying to stay invisible. Now I'm about to flee the country with a former Mafia boss who wants to leave his criminal empire behind. It's like something from a movie, not real life. Vincent closed the distance between us, his eyes never leaving mine. "Does it frighten you? This life that's nothing like what you planned?" I considered the question seriously. "Parts of it terrify me," I admitted. "The danger, the uncertainty, starting over in a country where I don't even speak the language." I reached up to touch his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. "But other parts feel more right than anything I've known before. You. The 3 of us together. The chance to build something that's ours, not dictated by circumstance." Something fierce and tender blazed in Vincent's eyes at my words. He captured my hand against his cheek, turning to press a kiss to my palm. "Ti amo, Lily Cooper," he said softly, the Italian words flowing naturally from his lips. "I love you. I should have said it sooner, but I wanted to be sure you knew it wasn't about possession or control. It's about choice. My choice to love you, your choice to accept that love or not." The declaration, so simple yet so profound, stole my breath. In all the chaos and planning, the fear and anticipation, we had never spoken those words, though they had been building between us since that first night at the restaurant. "I love you too," I whispered, the truth of it resonating through my entire being. Not because you saved me, or because you can give Emma and me a better life. I love you for who you are beneath everything else. The man who makes pancakes shaped like elephants, who listens when I speak as if every word matters, who looks at my daughter like she's a miracle. Vincent drew me into his arms, his kiss deep and consuming, a physical manifestation of the promises we'd just exchanged. When we finally parted, both breathless, the sun had set completely, leaving us in the gathering darkness. "It's time," he said softly. "Enzo's prepared the cars. Maria will drive separately with Emma's things." Reality crashed back, the momentary bubble of love and connection giving way to the urgency of our situation. "I'll get Emma," I said, reluctantly pulling away from his embrace. As I turned to go, Vincent caught my hand once more. "Lily," he said, his voice low and intense. "Whatever happens next, remember this moment. Remember that what we're building is worth fighting for." His words carried an ominous weight that sent a shiver down my spine. But I nodded, squeezing his hand before heading back to the cabin, where my daughter waited, blissfully unaware that tonight would change her life forever. What I didn't know then, as I climbed the steps to gather Emma and her beloved Bruno, was just how prophetic Vincent's words would prove to be, and how soon our love would be tested by forces more powerful and dangerous than I could have imagined. The convoy of black SUVs moved silently through the night, headlights cutting through darkness as we wound our way down mountain roads toward the private airfield Vincent had arranged. Emma slept against my shoulder, her small body warm and trusting, Bruno the bear clutched tightly in her arms. In the driver's seat, Vincent maintained a vigilant silence, his eyes constantly scanning the road ahead in the rearview mirror, one hand resting on my knee as if to reassure himself that I was still there. Enzo led in the first vehicle, while Maria followed behind us. 2 additional SUVs filled with security personnel Vincent called associates completed our procession, a small army mobilized for our protection. The overt display of force should have frightened me, but instead, I found it oddly comforting, tangible proof of Vincent's determination to keep us safe. "How much farther?" I asked quietly, careful not to wake Emma. 20 minutes, Vincent replied, his voice low. "The plane is fueled and waiting. Once we're airborne, we can breathe easier." I nodded, gazing out at the thick forest flanking the road. It seemed peaceful, almost serene in the moonlight, belying the tension that thrummed through our little convoy. As if reading my thoughts, Vincent squeezed my knee gently. "It's going to be all right, Lily. This time tomorrow, we'll be watching the sunrise over the Mediterranean." I tried to picture it, a new dawn in a new country, the 3 of us together on the terrace of some beautiful villa, the worst behind us. The image was so alluring, so tantalizingly close. I almost allowed myself to believe it would be that simple. The first indication that it wouldn't be came as we rounded a sharp bend in the road. Enzo's SUV ahead of us suddenly accelerated, then swerved violently. Through the windshield, I caught a glimpse of something in the road, dark shapes, the glint of metal. "Get down!" Vincent shouted, his hand moving from my knee to push my head below the dashboard in one fluid motion. The SUV lurched as he slammed on the brakes, then swerved to avoid colliding with Enzo's now-stopped vehicle. The sound of gunfire shattered the night, sharp staccato bursts that sent panic surging through me. Emma woke with a startled cry, and I pulled her down to the floor of the back seat, shielding her body with mine. "Stay down," Vincent commanded, his voice transformed, hard, authoritative, the voice of a man accustomed to being obeyed in moments of crisis. He reached beneath his seat and pulled out a handgun, the metal gleaming dully in the darkness. "Vincent!" Fear strangled my voice as I clutched Emma, who had begun to sob against my chest. "It's an ambush," he said grimly, his eyes meeting mine briefly in the rearview mirror. "Salvatore's men. They must have been tracking us, waiting for us to leave the cabin." His gaze softened momentarily. "I'm sorry, Lily. Stay with Emma. No matter what happens, don't move unless I tell you to." Before I could respond, he was out of the vehicle, keeping low as he made his way toward Enzo's SUV. Through the windows, I could see dark figures moving among the trees, the muzzle flashes of their weapons illuminating the night in brief, terrifying bursts. Emma's small body trembled against mine, her sobs quieter now but no less heartbreaking. "Mommy, I'm scared," she whimpered. "What's happening? Where's Vincent?" "It's going to be okay, baby," I whispered, stroking her hair, trying to keep my voice steady despite the terror clawing at my throat. "Vincent and Enzo are taking care of it. We just need to stay very quiet and still, like we're playing hide and seek." The comparison seemed to register with her 4-year-old mind, and she nodded against my chest, her little hands clutching Bruno even tighter. I could feel her hot tears soaking through my shirt, and rage surged through me. Rage that my child was being subjected to this violence, that our chance at happiness was being threatened by men whose names I didn't even know. Outside, the gunfire intensified, then abruptly ceased. The sudden silence was almost more terrifying than the chaos that had preceded it. I strained to see through the windows, desperate for a glimpse of Vincent, for any sign that he was still alive. The driver's door was yanked open, and I nearly screamed until Vincent's face came into view. There was blood on his cheek, whether his or someone else's I couldn't tell, and his eyes burned with a cold fury I'd never witnessed before. "We need to move," he said tersely. "Now. Leave everything except Emma." I didn't question him, just gathered my daughter in my arms and followed his outstretched hand to exit the vehicle. Outside, the scene was something from a nightmare. Enzo's SUV had bullet holes riddling its side, and dark shapes lay motionless on the road. Bodies I deliberately avoided looking at as Vincent hurried us toward the undamaged vehicle that had been behind us, the one Maria had been driving. Maria herself stood beside it, her normally serene face tight with worry. "Quickly," she urged, opening the back door for us. "More will be coming." "Where's Enzo?" I asked as I climbed in with Emma, realizing I hadn't seen Vincent's right-hand man. "Wounded, but alive," Vincent answered grimly, sliding into the driver's seat as Maria took the passenger side. "Carlo is taking him to a doctor we can trust." As we sped away from the ambush site, I finally allowed myself to process what had just happened. Men had died, had been killed, possibly by Vincent himself, in defense of us. The abstract knowledge of his criminal background had suddenly become viscerally real, painted in blood and gunfire on a dark mountain road. "They knew our route," Vincent said to Maria, his voice tight with controlled rage. "The only people who knew the exact route were in those cars." Maria's response was in rapid Italian, too quick for me to catch with my limited vocabulary, but I understood the implications. Someone had betrayed us, someone close enough to know our plans. I held Emma close as she drifted back to sleep, exhausted by fear and tears. Over her head, my eyes met Vincent's in the rearview mirror. "What now?" I asked softly. "We can't risk the airfield," he replied. "It will be watched. We need to disappear until I can arrange another extraction." "Disappear where? If Salvatore found us at the cabin?" "Not all of my properties are known, even to my closest associates," Vincent cut in. "There's a place on the coast. It belonged to my mother's family, not connected to the Russo name at all." The drive seemed endless, winding through back roads and small towns I'd never seen before. Emma slept fitfully in my arms, occasionally whimpering in dreams I feared were now populated by gunfire and shouting. Dawn was breaking by the time we reached our destination, a modest house perched on the edge of a cliff overlooking the ocean, isolated and unassuming compared to Vincent's other properties I'd seen. "It's not what you're used to," he said almost apologetically as he helped us from the car, taking Emma's sleeping form from my tired arms. "But it's defensible and untraceable." The house was indeed simpler than the mansion or lakeside cabin, a single-story structure with weathered shingles and salt-stained windows. Inside, however, it was surprisingly cozy, with comfortable furniture draped in dust covers and walls lined with bookshelves. "My mother brought me here as a child," Vincent explained as he laid Emma on a sofa Maria had quickly prepared with fresh linens, before my father's business consumed our lives. "No one in the organization knows about it, not even Enzo." The mention of Enzo brought back the image of the bullet-riddled SUV, the dark shapes on the road. "Will he be all right?" I asked, sinking into an armchair, sudden exhaustion making my limbs leaden. Vincent's expression tightened. The bullet caught him in the shoulder. "Carlo will get him proper treatment." He knelt before me, taking my hands in his. "Lily, I need to know. Are you and Emma all right? Not physically, but... He trailed off, his eyes searching mine for signs of the shock and horror he clearly expected to find. I considered the question seriously. The events of the night should have left me traumatized, desperate to flee not just Salvatore's men but Vincent himself. Yet what I felt was something altogether different. A cold, clear anger that anyone would try to harm my daughter. To steal the future we were building. We're alive, I said finally. Thanks to you. That's what matters right now. Relief washed over his face, followed quickly by guilt. This is my fault, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I thought we had more time. I underestimated Salvatore's resources, his determination. Stop, I said firmly, squeezing his hands. You didn't create this situation. You're trying to leave it behind. If anything, I'm the one who complicated things by grabbing your hand that night, by bringing Emma into your life. Vincent shook his head vehemently. Never think that. You and Emma are the best things that have ever happened to me. Without you. He trailed off, and I saw in his eyes the bleak emptiness of the path he might have continued on. Powerful but alone, feared but never loved. Maria appeared in the doorway, her quiet presence a reminder that we weren't entirely alone in this crisis. I've prepared the main bedroom for Lily and Emma, she said. And there's hot water for washing. You both should rest while you can. Vincent nodded gratefully to his sister. Thank you, Maria. I need to make some calls. Try to find out how they tracked us. The bedroom Maria had prepared was simply furnished but comfortable, with a large bed that would easily accommodate Emma and me, and windows that opened to the sound of waves crashing against the cliffs below. I washed Emma's tear-streaked face with a warm cloth, changed her into a clean nightgown Maria had somehow managed to bring from the cabin, and tucked her into bed without waking her fully. Only then, in the dim light of early morning with my daughter safely asleep, did I allow myself a moment of weakness. I sat on the edge of the bathtub in the adjoining bathroom, hands shaking as delayed shock set in. Men had died tonight. Bullets had flown past the car where my child slept. Vincent had transformed before my eyes from the man who made animal-shaped pancakes to someone capable of deadly violence. And yet, when I examined my feelings honestly, I found no desire to run from him, no regret for the path I'd chosen. What I felt instead was a fierce determination that matched his own, a resolve to protect what we had found together, no matter the cost. A soft knock at the bathroom door pulled me from my thoughts. I opened it to find Vincent standing there, his face freshly washed, the blood gone from his cheek revealing a shallow cut beneath. You should rest, he said softly, his eyes taking in my exhausted state. I can watch over things for a while. Have you found anything? I asked, gesturing for him to enter the small bathroom so we wouldn't wake Emma with our conversation. Vincent leaned against the sink, running a hand through his hair in that now familiar gesture of frustration. Nothing definitive. Carlo got Enzo to the doctor safely, but Enzo was in no condition to provide details. 2 of our security team didn't make it. His voice was flat, controlled, but I could sense the grief and rage beneath the surface. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. These were his men, people who had dedicated their lives to his service. Vincent nodded once, acknowledging my sympathy. The betrayal had to come from someone close. The route, the timing, it was too perfect. Ooh, could it have been Enzo? I asked hesitantly, remembering Vincent's earlier comment that not even his right-hand man knew about this coastal house. Vincent's eyes hardened. No. Enzo has been with me since we were teenagers. He's taken bullets for me before tonight. If he wanted me dead, he's had 1,000 better opportunities. I nodded, accepting his certainty. Then who? I have suspicions, he replied grimly. Franco has been restless lately, ambitious. And he stands to gain the most from my departure, or my death. Franco, the second-in-command Vincent had mentioned earlier, the one handling the remaining business transfers. The betrayal made a horrible kind of sense. What do we do now? I asked, suddenly aware that I was including myself in Vincent's strategic planning, that somewhere in the chaos of the night, I had fully committed to facing this threat alongside him, rather than as a passive victim. Vincent seemed to notice the shift too. his expression softening as he looked at me. We wait. Maria's brother is bringing secure communications equipment. Once it's here, I can contact Alessandro directly, arrange new transport. Within 48 hours, we should be able to leave safely. And in the meantime, we rest, we plan, and we keep Emma's world as normal as possible. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear with gentle fingers. Go lie down with her. I'll keep watch. I caught his hand, pressing it to my cheek. You need rest too, I said softly. When was the last time you slept? A faint smile touched his lips. I'll rest when you're both safe in Italy. Vincent. I fixed him with a stern look learned from years of motherhood. You can't protect us if you're collapsing from exhaustion. Lie down with us. Just for a few hours. Something vulnerable flickered in his eyes. Gratitude, perhaps, for the simple human concern I was showing. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. A few hours, he conceded. Maria will wake us if there's any sign of trouble. We slipped quietly into bed, Emma between us like a small, warm barrier. In sleep, her face was peaceful again, free from the fear that had contorted it during the ambush. Vincent watched her for a long moment, his expression unreadable, before meeting my gaze over her curly head. I never thought I'd have this, he whispered, so quietly I almost didn't hear him. A family. Someone to protect who isn't bound by fear or obligation. Is that what we are? I asked, equally soft. A family? Vincent's hand found mine atop the covers, our fingers intertwining. If you want us to be, he said, uncertainty making him look suddenly younger, more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. When this is over, when we're safe, I want to make it official. To be Emma's father in every way that matters. To be your husband, if you'll have me. The proposal, coming after a night of violence and fear, should have seemed absurd. Instead, it felt like the most natural progression imaginable, acknowledgement of the bond that had formed between us since that first desperate moment in the restaurant. Yes, I said simply, the word carrying the weight of all I couldn't articulate. My love, my trust, my absolute certainty that despite everything, Vincent Russo was the man I wanted to build a life with. Relief and joy washed over his face, followed quickly by fierce determination. Then I swear to you, Lily Cooper, we will get through this. We will have our new beginning. I believed him. Despite the danger surrounding us, despite the enemies still hunting us, I believed in the future Vincent promised. With that certainty warming me, I drifted into exhausted sleep. My hand still entwined with his above our sleeping daughter. I woke to late afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. Emma's side of the bed was empty, but I could hear her high, clear voice chattering away, punctuated by Maria's gentle responses. Vincent was gone as well, though the indent of his head on the pillow suggested he'd slept longer than he'd initially planned. After washing and changing into clothes Maria had thoughtfully laid out, simple jeans and a sweater that somehow fit perfectly, I followed the voices to the kitchen. The scene that greeted me was so domestic, so normal. It momentarily made me forget the danger lurking beyond our sanctuary. Emma sat at the kitchen table, her face smeared with something chocolatey as she worked intently on what appeared to be a drawing. Maria stood at the stove, stirring something that smelled deliciously of tomatoes and herbs. And Vincent, my heart constricted at the sight of him, sat across from Emma, his own piece of paper covered in careful lines, as he demonstrated some kind of art technique to my enraptured daughter. He looked up as I entered, his face lighting with a smile that transformed him from the hard, dangerous man of last night into someone else entirely, someone who belonged in this cozy kitchen, teaching a little girl how to draw. "Mommy!" Emma exclaimed, holding up her artwork. "Look, Vincent is teaching me how to draw the ocean, and Maria made hot chocolate with real chocolate, not the powder kind." "I can see that," I laughed, wiping a smudge from her cheek. "On the paper and on your face." Vincent rose to pull out a chair for me, dropping a kiss on the top of my head as I sat, a casual gesture of affection that felt both new and perfectly natural. "She's a quick learner," he said proudly, as if Emma's artistic abilities somehow reflected on him, inherited her mother's eye for detail. The normalcy of the moment was so precious, so fragile in the context of our circumstances, that I wanted to preserve it, to stretch it out indefinitely, but reality intruded in the form of a sharp knock at the door, a coded pattern that made Vincent and Maria exchange glances. "Carlo," Vincent said, moving swiftly to the entrance, one hand instinctively reaching beneath his shirt, where I knew the gun was holstered. I pulled Emma onto my lap, holding her close as Vincent checked through a peephole before opening the door to admit Maria's brother, the same man I'd glimpsed briefly at the cabin. He carried several hard-sided cases, which he set down carefully before greeting his sister with a kiss on each cheek. "Any problems?" Vincent asked, helping Carlo with the equipment. "None," Carlo replied, his English heavily accented but clear. "The roads are clear, no sign of surveillance. Enzo is stable, recovering at the safe house in the city." Vincent nodded, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "And the equipment?" "All here. Secure satellite communication, untraceable." "And the other items you requested?" Carlo's eyes flickered to Emma and me, then back to Vincent. "Alessandro sends word that the new arrangements are nearly complete. 48 hours, as you said." I felt a surge of hope at the news. In 2 days we could be on our way to Italy, to safety, to the new life Vincent had promised. The night's horrors seemed suddenly distant, a nightmare fading in the warm light of possibility. But as Vincent and Carlo set up the communications equipment in what appeared to be a small study off the main living area, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were merely in the eye of the storm, that the worst was yet to come. Later, after Emma had been tucked into bed with Bruno and a story from Maria, I found Vincent on the cliffside patio, staring out at the darkening ocean. The wind ruffled his hair, and in profile against the setting sun, he looked like something carved from stone, beautiful and unyielding. "Carlo's gone?" I asked, coming to stand beside him at the railing. Vincent nodded. "Back to the city to coordinate with Alessandro and check on Enzo." He turned to me, his eyes serious in the fading light. "The new arrangements are set. A different airfield, a different route. We leave at dawn the day after tomorrow." "And then Italy?" I slipped my hand into his, needing the connection. "Then Italy," he confirmed, squeezing my fingers. "The villa is being prepared as we speak. New identities, new papers, everything we need to start over." I leaned into his side, drawing strength from his solid presence. "Do you really think we can do it? Just walk away from everything? Leave it all behind?" Vincent was quiet for a long moment, his gaze returning to the horizon where stars were beginning to appear above the darkening water. "Yes," he said finally, with a certainty that soothed my doubts. "It won't be easy. There will be adjustments, challenges we can't foresee, but yes, Lily, we can build a new life, together." He turned fully toward me then, taking both my hands in his. "Last night, in the bedroom, you said yes to my proposal. Did you mean it? Or was it the aftermath of everything we'd been through? The fear and adrenaline talking?" The vulnerability in his question touched me deeply. This powerful man who commanded empires and inspired both fear and loyalty still doubted whether I truly wanted him, still worried that my acceptance was born of circumstance rather than choice. "I meant it," I said firmly, meeting his gaze without hesitation. "I want to marry you, Vincent. Not because of what you can provide or protect us from, but because of who you are, who you're choosing to become, for Emma and for me." Relief washed over his features, followed by something deeper, more intense. "When we reach Italy," he said, his voice husky with emotion, "when we're safe, I'll give you the wedding you deserve. Something beautiful, something worthy of you." I smiled, touched by his romantic vision, but also aware of the practicalities. "I don't need anything elaborate, just you, me, Emma, and whoever else matters to us. The important thing is making it official, making us a real family." Vincent pulled me into his arms, his embrace warm against the cool ocean breeze. "A family," he repeated, wonder in his voice. Something I never thought I'd have. As we stood there on the cliff's edge, the future stretched before us like the darkening ocean, vast and unknown but full of possibility. In 48 hours, we would leave this coast for another, trading one ocean for a distant sea, and despite the dangers still lurking, the enemies still hunting us, I found myself filled with a quiet certainty that we would make it. that the life Vincent and I envisioned together was within our reach. What I didn't yet understand was just how high a price we would have to pay to claim it. The 48 hours that followed passed in a strange limbo of domesticity and vigilance. By day, we maintained a facade of normalcy for Emma's sake. Walks along the private stretch of beach below the cliffs, drawing lessons with Vincent, Italian vocabulary taught patiently by Maria. But at night, when Emma slept soundly in our shared bedroom, the adults gathered around secure satellite phones and maps, planning our escape with the precision of a military operation. On the morning of our departure, I woke before dawn to find Vincent already up, standing at the bedroom window. The faint gray light of approaching sunrise outlined his silhouette, strong and steady as he kept watch over the sleeping world. "Everything ready?" I whispered, careful not to wake Emma. Vincent turned, his face softened by the dim light. "Yes. Carlo arrived an hour ago. The cars are prepared. The route secured. Alessandro has confirmed the plane is waiting." He crossed to sit on the edge of the bed, reaching out to brush a strand of hair from my face. "By tonight, we'll be in Italy." The certainty in his voice eased the knot of anxiety that had lived in my chest since the ambush. I leaned into his touch, drawing strength from his confidence. "I should wake Emma," I said, glancing at our daughter's sleeping form. "Get her ready." Vincent shook his head slightly. "Let her sleep a little longer." Carlo brought breakfast. "Come eat something before the journey." In the kitchen, Maria was already preparing coffee, the rich aroma filling the small space. Carlo stood by the window, his posture alert as he scanned the landscape outside. The tension in the room was palpable despite the mundane activity of breakfast preparation. "Any word from Enzo?" I asked, accepting a cup of coffee from Maria with a grateful smile. "He's stable," Vincent replied, his voice low. "Still recovering, but out of danger. He'll join us in Italy once he's well enough to travel." I nodded, relieved that the loyal man who had taken a bullet protecting us would recover. "And Franco? Any confirmation it was him who betrayed us?" Vincent's expression hardened. "Yes. Alessandro's sources confirmed he met with Salvatore 2 days before the ambush. He's been dealt with." The flat finality in those 4 words sent a chill through me despite the warm coffee in my hands. I didn't ask for details, didn't want to know exactly what "dealt with" entailed. It was a stark reminder of the world Vincent came from, the power he still wielded even as he sought to leave it behind. "The others?" I asked instead. "Salvatore and his men? Still searching, but looking in the wrong places," Carlo answered, his eyes never leaving the window. "The false trail is working. They believe you're heading west, toward the Canadian border." Vincent nodded in satisfaction. "By the time they realize their mistake, we'll be over the Atlantic." The plan seemed solid, every contingency addressed, every weakness accounted for. Yet as I sipped my coffee, watching the sky lighten outside, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something, that fate had one more twist in store before allowing us our happy ending. An hour later, Emma was awake and dressed, excited about the big airplane adventure ahead. She chatted happily with Bruno the bear as I packed her backpack with snacks and small toys to keep her occupied during the flight. Maria had explained we were going on a special trip, and with a child's adaptability, Emma had accepted the change of plans without question. "Will we see dolphins in Italy?" she asked as I zipped up her jacket. "Italy," I corrected gently. "And yes, I think we might. The villa where we'll be staying is right by the sea. And Vincent will live with us? And Maria, too?" I smiled, touched by her eager inclusion of the 2 people who had so quickly become essential parts of our lives. "Yes, Vincent will live with us. He's going to be part of our family now. Maria will visit often, but she has her own home." Emma considered this, her small face serious. "Like a daddy? Vincent will be like my daddy?" The question caught me off guard, though it shouldn't have. Despite her young age, Emma understood family structures, knew from books and friends that most families had mothers and fathers. David had been absent for so much of her life that she had no real attachment to him as a father figure, no grief for his loss. "Yes," I said softly, kneeling to look into her eyes. "Vincent wants to be your daddy. Would you like that?" Her enthusiastic nod and bright smile were answer enough, warming my heart as I helped her with her shoes. Whatever dangers lay ahead, whatever challenges our unconventional family might face, Emma's simple acceptance was a powerful affirmation of the choice I'd made. The convoy that would take us to the airfield was more modest than our previous attempt. Just 2 vehicles instead of 5, a deliberate strategy to attract less attention. Vincent, Emma, and I would travel in the lead car with Carlo driving, while Maria and a single security guard would follow in the second vehicle, creating the appearance of a family outing rather than a high-security transport. As we loaded the few possessions we were taking, Vincent pulled me aside, pressing a small box into my hand. "Open it later, on the plane," he murmured, brushing a kiss against my temple. "When we're safely in the air." The weight and size suggested jewelry, perhaps a proper engagement ring to replace the sapphire that currently adorned my finger, not that I needed anything more elaborate. Before I could respond, Carlo signaled it was time to leave, and the moment passed in the flurry of final preparations. Emma chattered happily as we drove, pointing out interesting shapes in the clouds and asking endless questions about Italy. Vincent answered each one patiently, his hand resting on my knee in what had become a familiar gesture of connection. The normalcy of the scene, a father figure entertaining a curious child, a family embarking on an adventure, was so beautifully ordinary that I could almost forget the extraordinary circumstances that had brought us together. The coastal road wound along cliffs and through small fishing villages, deliberately avoiding major highways where cameras or informants might spot us. The sun climbed higher, burning away the morning mist and revealing a perfect blue sky. A good omen, I decided, for our new beginning. We were midway through our journey when Carlo suddenly tensed, his eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. "We're being followed," he said quietly, his voice carefully neutral so as not to alarm Emma. Vincent turned slightly, his casual posture belied by the alertness in his eyes. "How many? How far back?" "Single vehicle, black sedan." Keeping consistent distance for the last 10 minutes, I instinctively pulled Emma closer, though she remained blissfully oblivious, singing softly to Bruno about the adventures awaiting them in Italy. "Options?" Vincent asked, his voice calm despite the sudden tension. Carlo considered for a moment. "Next village. Narrow streets, market day, we can lose them there. Switch to the contingency vehicle." Vincent nodded once, then reached for the secure phone to alert Maria in the car behind us. The brief conversation in Italian was too quick for me to follow, but I understood enough to know they were implementing one of the backup plans we had discussed. "Lily." Vincent turned to me, his eyes serious but steady. "We're going to make a brief stop in the village ahead. Carlo will create a diversion while we transfer to another vehicle Maria has arranged. It will only take minutes." I nodded, maintaining a calm facade for Emma's sake, while fear churned beneath. "Should I tell her anything?" "Just that we're stopping for a treat," Vincent suggested, his voice gentle. "Keep it simple." When we entered the village a few minutes later, it was indeed bustling with market activity, stalls lining the narrow streets, locals and tourists mingling in the sunny square. Carlo navigated expertly through the crowded lanes before pulling into a small alleyway behind what appeared to be a bakery. Maria's car continued past, maintaining the illusion that we were still in the lead vehicle. As we quickly exited, I spotted a nondescript white van waiting at the end of the alley, its engine running. "Ice cream, Mommy?" Emma asked hopefully, noticing the gelato shop across the square. "Not right now, sweetheart," I said, forcing a cheerful tone. "We need to change cars first, and then maybe we can have a treat on the plane." Vincent scooped Emma into his arms, moving swiftly but without the kind of haste that might attract attention. "What flavor would you like when we get to Italy?" he asked, masterfully distracting her as we crossed to the waiting van. "They make the best pistachio gelato in the world there." Emma launched into an earnest debate about ice cream flavors, allowing us to complete the transfer without her noticing anything amiss. Once inside the van, with Vincent beside me and Emma secure between us, I released the breath I'd been holding. Carlo remained behind, tasked with leading our pursuers away from our actual route, a dangerous assignment that he had volunteered for without hesitation. The new driver, a silent man Maria introduced simply as Paolo, pulled away smoothly, taking us through a maze of back streets before rejoining the coastal road several miles from where we'd left it. "Will they follow Carlo?" I asked Vincent quietly as Emma became absorbed in a picture book Maria had produced from her bag. "Most likely," he replied, his voice pitched low. "The car is identical to this one from the outside." and Carlo knows how to keep them occupied without endangering himself. I nodded, choosing to believe this reassurance despite the worry gnawing at me. How much farther to the airfield? An hour, perhaps less with Paolo driving. Vincent's hand found mine, squeezing gently. We're going to make it, Lily. I promise you that. The remainder of the journey passed in tense silence among the adults, though Emma remained cheerfully oblivious, eventually dozing off against Vincent's side. Bruno clutched to her chest. Vincent kept one arm around her protectively, while his free hand maintained contact with mine, a lifeline in the sea of uncertainty. When we finally arrived at the airfield, a small private facility with minimal staff, the relief was palpable. A sleek jet waited on the tarmac, its engines already warming up for departure. Alessandro himself stood at the bottom of the boarding stairs, his elegant appearance incongruous against the utilitarian surroundings. Vincent, he greeted with formal warmth as we approached. The papers are complete. Everything is prepared. Vincent clasped the lawyer's hand firmly. Any complications? None. The pilot has filed a flight plan for a private party returning to Rome after a fishing holiday. Immigration has been handled. You'll be met in Italy by trusted associates. As Vincent and Alessandro finalized details, Maria helped me gather our few belongings and guide a sleepy Emma toward the plane. The interior was luxurious, but understated. Cream leather seats, polished wood accents, and enough space for the small group to travel in comfort. Will you be coming with us? I asked Maria, as she settled Emma into a seat with a blanket and Bruno. She shook her head, a sad smile touching her lips. Not this time. I have matters to attend to here first, but I'll join you soon, in a few weeks. I hugged her impulsively, suddenly aware of how much I'd come to rely on her calm presence. Thank you. For everything. Take care of him, she said softly. My brother has never allowed himself happiness before. He doesn't quite know how to accept it yet. Before I could respond, Vincent and Alessandro boarded, the latter carrying a briefcase handcuffed to his wrist. Our new identities and financial documents, I presumed, were cleared for immediate takeoff, Vincent announced, his expression lighter than I'd seen in days. Alessandro will accompany us to Rome to handle any final legal matters. As the plane began to taxi, I gazed out the window at the American coastline, the country that had been my only home now receding into the distance. Emma stirred beside me, blinking sleepily. Are we flying now, Mommy? Almost, sweetheart. Just a few more minutes. Vincent took the seat opposite us, his eyes meeting mine with quiet intensity. Once we're in the air, he said softly, we're beyond their reach. Salvatore's influence doesn't extend to Italy. I nodded, allowing myself to believe that safety was finally within our grasp. The plane gathered speed, the force of acceleration pressing us back against our seats as we lifted into the clear blue sky. Leaving behind the danger and darkness of Vincent's former life, Emma squealed in delight at the sensation of flight, her first time on any aircraft, momentarily distracting me from my thoughts. By the time the seatbelt sign was turned off and we had reached cruising altitude, she was fully awake and eager to explore every feature of the luxury jet. Alessandro entertained her with stories of Italy, while Vincent and I moved to a pair of seats at the rear of the cabin for a moment of relative privacy. Open it, Vincent said, gesturing to the small box he had given me earlier, which I'd slipped into my pocket during our hasty departure. With slightly trembling fingers, I lifted the lid to reveal not a ring, as I'd expected, but a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. When I pressed the tiny clasp, it opened to reveal a miniature photograph of the three of us, Vincent, Emma, and me, taken by Maria during one of our quiet moments at the coastal house. It's beautiful, I whispered, genuinely touched by the thoughtful gift. Vincent lifted the necklace from its box, motioning for me to turn so he could fasten it around my neck. I wanted you to have something to remind you that no matter what names we use, what identities we adopt, the three of us, our family, that's what's real. The locket rested just above my heart, its weight subtle but significant. Thank you, I said, turning back to face him. For this. For everything you've done to protect us. His expression softened as he reached out to touch the sapphire ring still on my finger. This was my promise to you. In Italy, I'll replace it with a proper wedding ring, if you still want that. I do, I assured him. leaning forward to kiss him softly, more than ever. The rest of the flight passed in a blur of quiet conversations, plans for our new life, and Emma's excitement about the adventure ahead. Alessandro provided us with our new identities, Vincent and Lily Rossi, with Emma taking the same surname, documentation that showed us as a legally married couple who had recently adopted Emma after a distant relative's passing. The story was simple enough to remember, but detailed enough to withstand scrutiny. As we began our descent toward Rome, Emma pressed her face against the window, gasping at the sight of the Mediterranean glittering beneath us, like scattered diamonds in the afternoon sun. Vincent moved to sit beside her, pointing out landmarks, and explaining that we would travel from Rome to our coastal villa by car, another 3 hours, but through some of the most beautiful countryside in the world. I watched them together, this unlikely father and daughter pair, and felt a sense of rightness that transcended all the danger and uncertainty we had faced. Whatever happened next, the three of us were bound together now by choice and circumstance, forming a family forged in crisis but built to endure. The villa exceeded even Vincent's descriptions. Perched on a cliff overlooking the Tyrrhenian Sea, it was a perfect blend of historic architecture and modern comfort: warm terracotta walls, a red-tiled roof, and gardens cascading down the terraced hillside toward a private beach below. Bougainvillea climbed the ancient stone walls, its vibrant purple blossoms contrasting with the earthy tones of the structure. Emma ran from room to room, exclaiming over the four-poster bed in what would be her chamber, the sun-drenched kitchen with its wood-burning pizza oven, and most especially, the infinity pool that seemed to merge with the sea beyond. "It's perfect," I said to Vincent as we stood on the terrace, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and crimson. Alessandro had departed for Rome after settling us in, and for the first time since the ambush, we were truly alone, just our little family in this beautiful sanctuary. "It was my grandmother's favorite place," Vincent replied, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "She always said the light here healed the soul." I leaned back against his chest, savoring the solid warmth of him. "Do you think we're safe now? Truly safe?" Vincent was quiet for a moment, his breath stirring my hair. "Yes," he said finally. "My contacts in America confirm that Salvatore believes we died in a boating accident off the coast. The bodies of 2 of his own men were used to create the illusion. Carlo's idea, brutal but effective. I shivered slightly at the ruthless efficiency of this deception, but couldn't deny its necessity. "And your business? The transition?" "Complete. My legitimate interests have been transferred to holding companies Alessandro manages. The other aspects..." He hesitated. "Let's just say there was enough chaos after Franco's betrayal was exposed that several ambitious captains tore each other apart fighting for control. Salvatore got what he wanted. My organization dismantled, but not in the way he intended." There was a note of regret in his voice. Not for the criminal empire he'd abandoned, but for the loyalty of men like Enzo, who had served him faithfully for years. "Enzo will join us?" I asked, sensing his thoughts. Vincent nodded. "Once he's recovered. Maria too, eventually, and perhaps in time, we can build connections here. Not the kind I had before, but friends, community, a normal life. Normal." The word hung between us, laden with hope and possibility. What would normal look like for us? A former Mafia boss, a single mother, and the child who would bind our unusual family together? "Mommy! Vincent!" Emma's voice called from inside the villa. "I'm hungry. Can we have pizza?" Vincent laughed, the sound free and unguarded in a way I'd never heard before. "I think normal begins with dinner," he said, pressing a kiss to my temple. "Shall we see if I remember how to use that pizza oven?" The evening that followed was like something from a dream. Vincent teaching Emma how to knead dough with flour-covered hands, the 3 of us assembling toppings together, then eating our slightly misshapen creations on the terrace beneath a sky ablaze with stars. For those few hours, the danger and violence of the past seemed to belong to another lifetime, another world entirely. Later, after Emma had been tucked into her new bed with Bruno and a story about Italian mermaids, Vincent and I stood in the master suite, the doors to the balcony open to admit the gentle sea breeze, and the distant sound of waves breaking against the cliffs below. "Are you happy?" Vincent asked softly, his fingers tracing the line of the locket at my throat. "Is this what you wanted when you grabbed my hand that night?" I laughed softly at the absurdity of the question. I didn't want anything that night except to avoid my ex-husband. I certainly wasn't looking for a mafia boss to fall in love with. "Former mafia boss," he corrected with a small smile. "Former mafia boss," I agreed, reaching up to touch his face, tracing the line of his jaw. "And no, this isn't what I wanted then. I couldn't have imagined this, any of this. But now..." I stepped closer, eliminating the space between us. "Now, I can't imagine wanting anything else." Vincent's arms encircled me, drawing me against the solid warmth of his chest. "I love you, Lily Cooper. Or rather, Lily Rossi now. I love you too, Vincent Russo. I mean, Rossi." Our lips met in a kiss that held all the promise of our new beginning. Tender yet passionate. Familiar yet thrilling in its possibilities. As Vincent lifted me onto the bed, I surrendered to the moment. To the man who had transformed from stranger to savior to beloved in the span of 3 extraordinary months. Later, lying in his arms with the moonlight streaming through the open balcony doors, I thought about the strange twists of fate that had led us here. A desperate grab for a stranger's hand that had changed everything. If I hadn't been working that night, if David hadn't appeared, if I'd chosen a different man to approach. The cascade of coincidences seemed too perfect, too deliberate to be mere chance. "What are you thinking about?" Vincent murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my bare shoulder. "Destiny," I replied honestly. "Do you believe in it?" He was quiet for a moment, considering. "I didn't used to. In my former life, I believed we made our own fate through strength and cunning." His arms tightened around me. "But now, after finding you and Emma, perhaps there are forces at work beyond our understanding." I smiled in the darkness, pressing closer to him. "Well, destiny or chance, I'm grateful. For all of it. Even the difficult parts. As am I," Vincent whispered, his lips brushing my forehead. "Now sleep, amore mio. Tomorrow we begin our new life in earnest." Secure in his embrace, I drifted toward sleep, the last of my fears finally dissolving in the certainty of our shared future. Whatever challenges might come, we would face them together, Vincent, Emma, and I. A family created by one desperate moment of connection that had somehow blossomed into love against all odds. 5 years later, "Mama, Papa, look what I found." Emma's voice carried across the garden where Vincent and I sat beneath the shade of an ancient olive tree. At 9 years old, she was all long limbs and wild curls, her skin tanned golden from the Italian sun. Her English now flavored with the musical cadence of Italian that she spoke as fluently as her native tongue. Vincent looked up from the financial reports he'd been reviewing, the legitimate business empire he now managed with a skill that had made us not just comfortable, but wealthy, beyond anything I'd imagined when I was a struggling waitress. "What treasure have you discovered, Piccola?" Emma ran toward us, carefully cradling something in her cupped hands. "A baby turtle. Can I keep it, please?" I exchanged an amused glance with Vincent, who now easily embodied the role of doting father. "Let me see," he said, setting aside his papers to examine Emma's find. "Ah, this is a special kind of turtle. It needs the sea to survive." Emma's face fell momentarily before brightening with a new idea. "Then we can take him to the beach. I'll build him a special pool in the rocks." "An excellent plan," Vincent agreed solemnly. "After lunch, perhaps?" This compromise satisfied Emma, who carefully placed her turtle in a bucket of water before skipping off to wash her hands for the meal Maria was preparing in the kitchen. At 60, Vincent's sister had settled permanently into the guest house on our property, her presence a beloved constant in our unconventional family. "She's growing up too fast," I sighed, watching our daughter disappear into the villa. Vincent reached for my hand, his thumb brushing over the gold wedding band that had replaced the sapphire 3 years earlier, when we'd formalized our marriage in a small ceremony on this very terrace. "They tend to do that," he said with a smile, "but we have time." We did have time. Something I'd once thought was a luxury beyond my reach. The years since our escape had been peaceful, our lives gradually expanding to include trusted friends in the local community, business associates of Vincent's legitimate enterprises, and even Enzo, who had recovered from his wounds to become our property manager and unofficial security consultant. The shadow of Vincent's former life had never completely disappeared. There were still nights when he woke from nightmares I couldn't share. Still moments when a sudden sound would trigger a vigilance that spoke of dangers long past, but those episodes had grown rarer with each passing year. The man who had once commanded fear and respect, now more comfortable in his role as husband, father, and respected businessman. As for me, I had found my own path in this new world, managing a small art gallery in the nearby town, using the degree in art history I'd finally completed through online courses. The shy, vulnerable woman who had grabbed a stranger's hand in desperate fear seemed like someone I'd known in another lifetime. A character in a story I might tell someday, when Emma was old enough to understand the remarkable journey that had brought us here. "What are you thinking about?" Vincent asked, echoing the question he'd asked that first night in the villa 5 years ago. I smiled, leaning against his shoulder as we watched the waves breaking on the beach below. I was thinking about destiny again, about how sometimes the worst moments in our lives can lead us to the best ones. Vincent nodded, his arm slipping around my waist to draw me closer. "Like grabbing a stranger's hand? Exactly like that," I agreed, turning to press a kiss to his jaw, now softened with the subtle lines that 5 years of peace and happiness had etched there. "Best mistake I ever made." His laughter joined with mine, carried away by the Mediterranean breeze that had become as familiar as the sound of Emma's footsteps, racing across the terracotta tiles, as beloved as the feeling of Vincent's arms around me each night. In that perfect moment, with my family gathered in the home we had created together, I knew with absolute certainty that I had found what I'd never dared to hope for on that fateful night at Bellissimo. Not just safety or security, but true belonging. A hand reached out in desperation had somehow led me home.